But I've been practicing and teaching yoga for over 30 years. One of the reasons why it's such an honor for me to be here to address you all is because I've always taught yoga from the perspective of liberation. From the time that I was a little boy, I was always conscious of the fact that African people, black people, people of African descent, and other people, you know, who are oppressed, but that African people, black people, where I was, you know, from which I come, were oppressed and in need of liberation. And so, you know, we always looked at various means of how to become liberated. You know, so some people wanted to take over and use arms. Some people wanted to move away and, you know, start their own country and move someplace else, and various means. But I look at liberation as something that comes from within. I look at liberation as something that we have to change our consciousness. We have to transform the way that we think and the way that we behave. When we change the way that we think, our behavior will change. And one of the things that I saw as a potential when I started to practice yoga was its utility as a tool for us to achieve liberation on an internal level. And I look at it also from the perspective that this is something that is not foreign to us. It is something which is a part of our ancient culture, going back as far as when we first came onto this planet. You know, in some way or form, we have been in tune with what I would call the principles upon which yoga, or the science of yoga, is based upon. So the word yoga itself, it means to yoke. It's not an African word, it's a Sanskrit word. But the word itself means to yoke, which is like a form of control. So it means to help you to be able to control your mind, your body, your thoughts, your emotions. The definition to me of insanity is when you're not able to control your mind. You can't control your thoughts, and therefore you can't control your behavior. So to me, that is insanity. So to me, to various degrees, most people living in this society are to some degree insane, because we operate from a point of view where somebody else is actually giving us our information, giving us our consciousness. You know, there are various vehicles of what I call vehicles of ideation by which our consciousness is created. And so the goal of yoga and meditation is to achieve a self-reliance, a self-independence, the ability to create your own reality, to create and generate your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own consciousness, and to move yourself into whatever direction that you choose, okay? So for the most part, many people who exist and live in this culture, in this society, are not aware to what degree that we are actually being controlled, that we are actually being manipulated. So when we start to practice yoga, and you know, for the most part, people think yoga is like, I'm going to do these different positions and stretch my body and stand on my head and twist my body up, and most people feel like, well, I can't even do that, and so on and so forth. Well, what we're going to do today, we're going to explode a lot of those different myths about what yoga is, and you have to be skinny, or you have to be flexible, or you have to, you know, most of those things are not even relevant to what yoga really is. Yoga is a whole science, and it's a whole philosophy. So our ancient ancestors practiced yoga. One of the reasons why there's a need for us becoming aware of this science of yoga in terms of from a health and wellness perspective. You know, so what you see over there, you see like an illustration of what our bodies are full of. You know, we have corporations deciding what we should put into our bodies. We put most of the things that many people You know, I'm not saying you all, I'm talking about people in general. We put a lot of processed things into our bodies. And the only way we can put processed things into our bodies is that we're putting processed things into our mind. Okay? The mind is receiving a consciousness that tells us it's okay to eat things and to put things into our bodies which are not real. Then that means that those corporations or those vehicles of control, those vehicles of ideation, have been able to establish a foothold in our behavior and in the way that we think and the way that we feel about ourselves. And so therefore, the first step has to be to begin to liberate our bodies, to begin to change our consciousness and begin to change our conception of what's good from a physical level in terms of what we put into our body, and also from an emotional intelligence perspective, what do we put into our mind and our consciousness. We know that African people, people of, black people, all oppressed people, have higher rates of, heart disease, high blood pressure, and we hear these various statistics. But what you're looking at is a picture, illustration of the blood vessels, and you can see, the plaque and the fat and the various, toxins building up in the blood, on the blood vessel as a consequence of this type of diet, which comes from a corporate consciousness. When we look at what's happening with our health as a people, we see that we're in a tremendous health crisis, which is unprecedented. For example, we have 10-year-old children with adult onset diabetes. You have to do a tremendous amount of damage to your body in order to develop diabetes, unless you're so-called genetically predisposed or you develop type 1 diabetes. But it used to be that, your grandmother or your uncle or somebody, when they got real old, they would say, I got the sugar, stuff like that, But now when we see 10-year-old children getting a disease which is a degenerative disease, we see our children degenerating before they even get a chance to even become adults. And that degeneration, hello my sister. I have lots of relatives here. But when we see our children degenerating before they even get the chance to become adults, and we see that, this is something which is unprecedented in the history of human beings. Human beings have been on the planet for a long time, 1 million, 2 billion years, so they say, and only in the last 20 years did we get to the point where we have 10-year-old children getting adult onset diabetes. So that means that there's been a tremendous shift and change in the way that we move and operate on the planet, and the way that we practice, and the things that we put into our bodies, and at the same time put into our minds. I was at a dinner last night, and the sister was talking about how this sister was 33. She was talking about how she would make a meal out of with like $1. She would buy 25 now and laters or something for a quarter. These cost a penny, and you would make a meal off of just garbage, off of just candy, And just think about generation after generation that we've been consuming this type of food. We consume hundreds of pounds of white sugar. The average single person consumes over 100 pounds. You just take a 100-pound bag of white sugar and just put it there, and you say, this is what I'm going to eat in 1 year. I can keep going on with statistics. Some of the things that afflict us are the legacy that we have from slavery. Okay, there are various authors now writing about post-traumatic slave syndrome. The trauma that occurs because of that slave experience. There was a movie I just was watching on HBO about people who were, about men returning back from war with post-traumatic stress syndrome. you know, and it's devastating these people. So let's imagine that slavery was 10,000 times worse than just simply being in battle and the effect that that would have upon a person. And that same trauma is passed on generation after generation. You know, whenever we look at TV, whenever we look at magazines, we primarily, even today in 2010, see ourselves portrayed in a negative way. We're consuming all these various negative images and information about ourselves on a constant level. When we begin to expose our children to things like yoga, you know, we see that there's reduced stress, there's increased concentration, there's increased patience, improved behavior, improved academic performance, and a decrease in the risk of diabetes, and decrease in things like asthma. You know, asthma is like a big problem, you know, among black children. Here goes some pictures of some children practicing, you know, children I've had the opportunity to teach, practicing various aspects of yoga, you know. And this is something that, you know, I started teaching yoga to children in 1979. In 1979, children were very resistant to yoga, but now children crave yoga. I have children come up to me and they say, I want to, you know, I could be in a school where one classroom is getting yoga and the other classroom is not getting yoga. And some of the kids from the class that is not getting yoga instruction, they come to me and they say, I need to do yoga. I'm angry. I have a lot of stress. So children recognize this stuff, that they're going through these various types of distress in their life. Children as young as infancy, really, but you see these children are 1, 2, 3 years old, and they can benefit from the practice of yoga. We see teens. You know, most of these boys here on this picture, they were identified as being juvenile delinquents and at risk and, you know, so on and so forth, you know. But the yoga intervention helped them to learn how to self-regulate, how to control their own mind, how to control their own body, how to control their own thoughts. And so this helped them to overcome a lot of that negative predisposition that society was trying to put them under. What you see here, you see like a symbol that the ancestors had. This symbol was called Heru. And Heru they use a hawk to represent this principle. And Heru represents your willpower, your ability to concentrate, your ability to focus. And Heru really represents the energy that a young person has. So we see the young people have tremendous powers of concentration, even though we may not see that, but they actually do have tremendous powers of concentration, tremendous powers of will that need to be cultivated. And so yoga helps them to cultivate that. In adults, you know, we see these different symbols. Like we see this symbol here, this is called Asar. And so we see this figure in a mummified form. We see the two eyes. The two eyes represents higher consciousness. His physical self is in the physical world, but his consciousness is on a higher level. That's what the two eyes represent. So that is a goal that we try to strive for, a goal of higher consciousness, a goal of being able to transcend our levels of attachment to the physical world.